Okay guys, I'm getting ready to install this Sputhe rear stabilizer on my 2003 Dyna Super Glide. I didn't see any videos or anything explaining how to put this on. There's tons of videos for the front stabilizer, which is pretty much a cakewalk. I don't think that's the one you really need too much help with. And it comes with instructions, but they're pretty much useless. One thing to note is you're going to see this in the package. This is not a part. This is actually a tool that's going to help you install it, and I'll go over that with you in just a little bit. Now, to install the upper bracket, you need to get to those two bolts right back in here, this one and that one. Now for mine, this little wire loom right here, right there, that little wire loom was kind of blocking it, that guy. So you couldn't get in there for a straight path to the two bolt heads. So what I did was I took this extension, and it's just a little strap, a little loop, and I tapped on the end of that lightly until I flattened out that strap a little bit so I can gain access and get a straight path to that second bolt head. Now, while taking out these 7/16 bolts for your belt guard, you'll notice that the front bolt is in there tight, in a tight space. There's a little hole in there to gain access to run an extension and a socket up in there. For me, what worked was a little 1/4-inch extension and a swivel, and that got me right up in there. Now, your bike may not even have the belt guard on. I know a lot of guys take them off, and that's your personal preference. And I did on my last bike too, because I thought it looked better. But after some rides out in Louisiana and on some gravel roads, and I had some experiences with some gravel kicking up, I decided to leave it on mine. But that's entirely up to you. Okay, with the belt guard removed, you're looking for these two bolts back here. Those are the engine mount bolts. There's one with the socket on it and the one right next to it. This side is 9/16, no surprise there. But what I found surprising was on the other side. I was expecting that to be a 9/16 also, and the 9/16 fits sloppy. It turned out to be a 14. Another thing is, you can get a wrench up in there, right through there. So you pass the wrench up through the bottom, just inside the frame, and you can hold the, get that on there. You gotta hold the head of the bolt just like that from under the frame while you're working the other side. Now, two things that might make this go a little easier for you is, one, I know it might be a little hard to find the bolt head on this side while you're trying to work the other side. What you can do to hold the wrench in place until you can walk around the other side is just pile some rags under there. And that should hold the wrench in place until you can reach under and hold it with your hand. Another thing is, when you're taking out these bolts, do one at a time. In other words, take one out and replace it before taking the other one out and replacing it, just so it keeps the holes lined up, and that'll make it a lot easier for you to put these in. Now, what I found easiest for me was to get the two nuts off before starting any of the bolts, and make sure that you have the engine supported by a jack and a piece of wood before you start pulling these bolts out. Okay, with the nuts removed, you can get to those bolts on the other side. Start on the first bolt with that straight path that you made by tapping back that wire loom. When you're putting in the new bolts, the replacement bolts, they're not going to go in the same ways that the old ones came out. They're actually going to go in the opposite side here and fed through that way, with the stud sticking out the other side. Okay, once you've gotten this far, you've got your bolts in, you can go ahead and let the jack down and take it out of the way. Because what I found is this piece here, to go back there, I'm going to have to take out the master cylinder, which is not a really big deal. what you'll have to do is undo this lock nut, screw it out of the master cylinder. I recommend you take a picture of the threads so you can put it back where it was if you already have it where you like it. And on this side, you're going to undo this bolt, go to the dealer or wherever you order your parts from and get 2 new crush washers, because every time you take this off you should put 2 new crush washers on it, and of course you're going to have to bleed it when you put it all back together, which is not a big deal either. And this nut right here is what actually holds it on, and you'll take that off. Master cylinder is out. The sizes I found were 1/2 inch for here, 7/16 for this guy. Back here, the bolt that holds it on turned out to be 1 1/8 socket, but it fit a little bit sloppy, so you might want to check your metric sizes and see if something fits a little bit better. And right here, the banjo bolt, that turned out to be a 3/8, but you want to use a 12 point for that. Also, when taking this rod out of the master cylinder, I backed it all the way out and it still didn't come out easily. I didn't want to goof up the threads, so only after I unbolted the back of the master cylinder, and this was also loosened as far as it would go, I was able to tilt the master cylinder down and then get this part out pretty easy without goofing up the threads. Alright, with the master cylinder out of the way, you can easily put that bracket in. I got it started because I can go around the other side and you can still see it good enough to hold it in place. You know, reach under here and hold it in place, and then get in this side with your extension and your swivel and tighten down those 2 bolts. And while you're working in this area, it's a pretty good idea to put some masking tape on these 2 surfaces to keep them from getting scratched. Using a 5/16 Allen socket, take out just the bottom bolt. Okay, here's the part where we use this installation tool. What you're going to do is, where you took that bottom bolt out, you're just going to thread that in most of the way, but leave enough sticking out like you would with a dowel pin. If you have trouble getting that to go in, you can use a 3/16 Allen socket to get that in. And you want just a little bit of that sticking out like that. Now once you have the top bolt out, you're just going to put this bracket with the bottom bolt hole on the dowel pin, and then you're going to take the top bolt that came with the kit, which is a 3/16 Allen bolt, and you're going to tighten that up. With the top bolt snugged up, you can now take out that stud that you had on the bottom that was keeping the holes lined up, and once you have that out, you can install the bottom bolt. With those 2 bolts tightened down, you're now ready to install the crosslink. Next, you can start the first crosslink bolt. It's a 3/8 12 point. I used a 1/4 inch and a swivel to get in there better. And if you want to, you can finish tightening it down with a wrench to get the best torque. With this first side bolted on, go ahead and turn the center this way until you get the eyelet under the other bolt hole so that you can bolt the other side in. With the second bolt started, this is a good time to make sure that you have all your pieces in here. There's a rubber grommet, rubber piece here, a washer, and the same thing on the other side. Make sure that the rubber piece is in there, the rubber, then the washer, and the bolt. Once you have that second bolt tight, you're just about done. All you need to do now is, with a 14mm, go ahead and tighten these lock nuts at either end of your crosslink. Once you have the lock nuts tightened down against each end of your crosslink, the installation is complete. Don't forget to put your master cylinder back on. I'm not doing mine today because I have to get some crush washers. And if you have a belt guard, you can go ahead and put that back on, and then you're finished. Hey guys, I just want to add a little addendum to this. Initially these two pieces here, I didn't really know what they were for. They had a little slack in them, and I left them that way. I thought they were to limit travel side to side. And in a way that's right. This is the stationary side. This side doesn't move. So what they really do is they brace up against each side of the frame here, and it's just a brace to take the stress off these main mounting bolts for side to side movement. So I back these out against the frame, tighten the lock nuts, and that's braced on either side so that the force that the stabilizer puts on this this other bracket is distributed not only to these bolts but also to these braces. A couple of other things I upgraded too was this bolt right here. It wasn't long enough to thread all the way through the original bolts. This is the bolt that came with it. It didn't thread all the way through to the top, so I felt better using all the threads to get maximum strength. So I replaced those with a little bit longer ones. The bolts are 3/8 with a 24 pitch, 1.5 inches long, and these are Hillman. I got these at Tractor Supply, and they're a grade 8. I went with grade 8 with all the pieces. The other bolts I upgraded was right in here. The original bolts threaded just into the bracket itself, so I felt a little more comfortable going with longer bolts, and the bolts I used for that was a Hillman grade 8, 3/8, 24 pitch, 3.5 inches long. And that also has this shoulder like this does, but it comes out longer than this one did. But as you can see on here, these threads didn't come all the way out to the end of the hole anyway, so the other bolts actually fit better. And what I did was I put these nuts on the end of them, and these are also grade 8, and I put 2 on each bolt. I put a lock washer, a nut, and then a lock nut on the end, so I'm pretty satisfied that's going to be not going anywhere. Also, what I had to do was, on the bracket itself, you can see how I had to grind out a little channel so I can get a socket in there, and on the other one I had to do the same thing, just a little bit. So I made sure there was a flat surface for the nut to sit against, which was pretty much flat already, and then grind out the channel so I can get a socket on there straight into each one, and that worked out pretty well. So I'm pretty satisfied that this isn't going anywhere, and everything should be good now.